In a world drowning in noise, distraction, and endless pursuits of power and pleasure, there was a man who dared to walk a different path, a path so radical that it would change the course of history. His name was Romuald, a noble born into privilege but restless in spirit, a man who abandoned all worldly comforts to embark on a daring adventure. The quest for the divine, for silence, and for the deepest truth hidden within the human soul. This is the story of Saint Romuald, the founder of the Camaldolese order, a story of wilderness and solitude, of fierce inner battles and miraculous grace. It is a tale of courage not measured by swords or armies, but by the strength to silence the chaos of the world and listen to the whisper of God. Join me now as we journey through dark forests where shadows dance with the wind, across rugged mountains bathed in dawn's first light, and into the quiet caves where faith burns like a steady flame. This is the adventure of a lifetime, the journey of a man who dared to seek holiness through solitude and prayer. Chapter 1. The Noble Origins of Romuald. Romuald was born into a world gilded with luxury and wrapped in the finest silks of nobility. His family was powerful and influential, their name known in courts and castles far and wide. Yet beneath the glittering surface of grand halls, lavish feasts, and endless celebrations, something stirred deep within the young Romuald's heart. A restless longing that no jewel or crown could satisfy. The days of his youth were filled with lessons in diplomacy, swordsmanship, and etiquette, the arts of power and influence. But even amid all this, Romuald felt a silent voice calling him, a whisper beyond the noise of the court. He watched the fleeting pleasures around him with growing detachment, feeling increasingly like a stranger in his own life. Then, fate struck with a cruel hand. A violent feud erupted within his own family, a bitter quarrel that shattered peace and brought bloodshed where there had once been trust. The opulence of his world crumbled overnight, revealing its fragile, fleeting nature. In the chaos, Romuald saw the dark heart of worldly power, a hunger that devoured everything, even love. That night, under a sky heavy with stars, Romuald made a decision that would change everything. He would abandon the life of privilege and seek a deeper meaning, a life where the soul could find peace beyond the reach of ambition and betrayal. With nothing but a simple cloak and a heart full of determination, he stepped into the unknown, leaving behind the world that had shaped him to discover the world that awaited inside himself. Chapter 2. A Journey into the Desert. The Call to Solitude. Romuald's journey led him far from the life he once knew, beyond the noise of cities, the glitter of courts, and the tangled webs of politics. He wandered into the wild places of the earth, places where the wind spoke secrets and the silence was so deep it echoed in the soul. The forests he entered were ancient, their towering trees like guardians of a forgotten world. The mountains rose sharply, their peaks piercing the clouds as if trying to touch the heavens themselves. Here, Romuald sought what he could not find in the halls of his youth: solitude, silence, and a direct encounter with the divine. But the wilderness was not kind. The cold bit into his skin, the nights stretched endlessly, and loneliness threatened to overwhelm him. His mind was a battlefield where doubt and temptation clashed with faith and hope. At times, the silence seemed like a vast emptiness, pressing in on him from all sides. Yet Romuald was no ordinary man. With every morning prayer, every whispered plea under the stars, he forged his spirit stronger. He met others like him, hermits and seekers who had chosen the hard road of silence and contemplation. These wise souls became his guides and companions, sharing ancient wisdom and stories of grace won through struggle. Together, they built a new way of life, one that balanced solitude with community, silence with shared faith. Romuald's vision grew clearer, a sanctuary where others could escape the chaos of the world to find peace and strength in prayer and quiet reflection. This was no simple journey. It was a fight for the soul itself, an adventure into the unknown depths of faith. And Romuald faced it all with courage, knowing that the greatest battles are often fought in silence. Chapter 3. The Birth of the Camaldolese Order. After years wandering through forests and mountains, battling silence and temptation, Romuald's vision began to take form, not just as a personal quest, but as a calling to create a new way of life. He dreamed of a place where the fierce solitude he had embraced could meet the strength and support of a brotherhood united by faith. The idea was revolutionary, an order where monks lived as hermits in their own small cells, embracing silence and prayer, yet coming together in community to share meals, worship, and counsel. It was a delicate balance, solitude without loneliness, silence without isolation. Romuald chose a wild and rugged hilltop in the heart of Tuscany, where the winds blew cold and the air was thick with the scent of pine and cedar. Here, among rocks and ancient trees, he founded the first Camaldolese monastery, a beacon of hope for those seeking refuge from the storm of the world. But the road was far from easy. Many saw Romuald's way as strange, even dangerous. The monks faced harsh winters, scarce food, and the doubts of those who believed such a life was too extreme. Enemies whispered behind closed doors, and old friends questioned his radical path. Yet Romuald stood firm. He led by example, enduring hunger and cold, praying through the darkest nights, never losing sight of his vision. Miracles began to follow in his footsteps, healed wounds, answered prayers, and moments of peace that touched the hearts of many. Word spread, and slowly others came. Men who hungered for a deeper connection with God, who longed to silence the noise inside and find clarity in the stillness. The Camaldolese order grew, a living testament to Romuald's faith and courage. In this new community, the wildness of nature and the wildness of the spirit met. Here, in the quiet cells and beneath the towering trees, the seeds of holiness took root, a legacy that would endure for centuries. Chapter 4. The Fire in the Mountains. The mountain air was thin and sharp, each breath a whisper of life in the wilderness. Romuald stood at the edge of the forest, gazing at the valley below, where morning fog clung to the earth like a veil. Behind him, his brothers stirred in their cells, silent figures wrapped in cloaks of wool, rising before the sun to meet the eternal in prayer. This was no place for comfort. The wind howled like a beast through the trees, snow often sealed the doors, and food was as humble as roots and bread. But in that harshness, something powerful grew, a fire not of the body, but of the soul. Every hardship became a chisel, shaping the monks into warriors of spirit, their silence louder than sermons, their faith stronger than stone. Romuald often withdrew to a smaller cave above the monastery, a place where the earth was bare and cold, yet the presence of God felt near, almost tangible. There he would spend days in solitude, fasting, praying, and wrestling with the invisible. He would emerge with eyes burning with a light that others could not explain, a light born not from himself, but from surrender. But the fire within Romuald did not remain hidden in the hills. News of his way spread like sparks carried by the wind. Pilgrims came, drawn by the mystery, seeking healing, wisdom, or simply peace. Some came with heavy burdens, guilt, despair, confusion, and left with tears of renewal and hearts ignited. Not all came with good intentions. There were critics, envious rivals, and voices from the church and nobility who feared that Romuald's radical ways would stir unrest. They called him mad, extreme, even dangerous. But Romuald did not fight back with words. He let the life speak for itself. He welcomed even his enemies with gentleness, offering them the same silence that had healed his own wounds. And miracles continued. A sick brother, pale and near death, was seen walking in the garden days after Romuald had laid hands on him. A drought-stricken village down the mountain received rain after the monks prayed through the night. Stories passed from mouth to mouth, and Romuald's name became legend, not because he sought it, but because the divine moved through him like fire through dry wood. In the stillness of that mountain, something eternal had been lit. Not just a new order, but a new way of being, a path of courage through simplicity, of victory through humility, of eternal flame born in the cold silence of the wilderness. Chapter 5. Temptation and Triumph. Though the forest was still and the stones of Camaldolese stood firm, within Romuald's soul, a storm once again began to rise. The enemy of peace does not sleep, and no saint, no matter how pure, is free from the whisper of temptation. Even in the heights of holiness, the shadows come crawling, seeking entry through cracks left by weariness or pride. Romuald, now older and revered, could have rested. He had disciples, communities, respect. Many called him a living saint. But comfort, even spiritual comfort, can be dangerous. One night, deep in prayer, he felt it, a sudden chill in his soul, a silence not sacred but hollow. Doubt crept in like smoke. What if I have done nothing? What if all this is vanity, just another form of pride? The darkness grew heavier with each passing day. His prayers felt dry, his visions dimmed. He questioned his calling. The familiar stillness of the forest now seemed suffocating, and the solitude he once loved became a burden. He felt alone again, not in body, but in spirit. And then came the voices. "You are nothing," they hissed. "You have failed. This fire will fade. You are forgotten." Romuald fell to the ground in anguish. He had faced wild beasts, hunger, rejection, but this was different. This was the weight of heaven's silence, the testing of the soul. But just as dawn comes after the blackest night, grace found him. In his moment of deepest despair, a memory sparked within him, not of visions or miracles, but of a single moment, kneeling alone in the snow years ago, whispering the name of God with no answer but peace. It had been enough then. Could it be enough now? With tears on his face, he stood up. He walked barefoot through the woods to a clearing where the sun had begun to rise. And there, with no words, no visions, only silence, he felt it, the presence. Not thunderous or grand, but deep, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. A gentle strength that whispered, "I am with you, even in your darkness." Romuald returned to his brothers with a fire brighter than before. His trials had not broken him. They had refined him. And from that moment on, his teachings bore a new depth, carved from suffering and surrender. He no longer taught from triumph alone, but from the valley he had walked through and the light he had found there. This was his true victory, not in founding monasteries, nor in the signs and wonders that followed him, but in standing tall after the storm, in proving that even the saints must struggle, and in showing that holiness is not the absence of battle, but the courage to keep walking when all is dark. Chapter 6. The Pilgrim's Torch. Romuald could no longer remain in one place. Though Camaldolese was his heart's vision, his spiritual homeland, the fire within him pushed him onward. Like the prophets of old, he was not made to rest beneath olive trees, but to walk among valleys and cities, to bring the silence of the wilderness into the noise of the world. So he became a pilgrim once more. With only a staff in hand and a worn cloak over his shoulders, he set out across the Italian countryside. From the high cliffs of the Apennines to the dusty roads near Ravenna, Romuald moved like a flame carried by the wind. Wherever he walked, he left behind traces of peace and stories that echoed long after his feet had passed. He entered villages where sin hung heavy, where greed had turned neighbors into enemies. He didn't preach with fire and thunder. He sat in silence. He listened, and slowly, like ice thawing under morning light, hearts began to open. Men confessed without being asked. Women returned to prayer. Children followed him, drawn to the strange old man whose eyes seemed to see through lies and into the soul. One evening, as he walked through a town plagued by corruption, a nobleman mocked him openly in the streets, calling him a beggar with a broken mind. Romuald simply bowed his head. But 3 nights later, the man appeared at the monastery gates, weeping like a child. He had seen Romuald in a dream, standing in a field of fire, untouched, and heard a voice say, "Follow him." Miracles followed his path like footsteps in the dust. A blind woman touched the edge of his cloak and saw again. A man possessed by rage collapsed at Romuald's feet and awoke as gentle as a lamb. But Romuald never claimed these wonders as his own. "I am nothing," he would say, "only a window. If you see light, give thanks to the sun." But even as he walked from village to village, Romuald felt the weight of age pressing upon him. His steps were slower, his breath shorter. He knew his time was drawing near. Still, he pushed forward, not for himself, but for those still lost in the noise, still yearning for the quiet voice of God. His final journeys were not marked by grandeur, but by something deeper, a radiance that came from within, as if the veil between this world and the next had already begun to thin. People who met him in those last years often spoke of his silence as a living presence, as if standing near him was like standing in the doorway of heaven. And so, Romuald kept walking, a pilgrim with a torch, not a flame, but a faith lighting the paths of souls in darkness. Chapter 7. The White Garment. The final chapters of Romuald's life were not written in ink, but in the silence of dawn, in the footsteps of disciples, and in the prayers whispered behind wooden doors. Though his body was tired and bent, there was a brightness in his face that made even strangers pause, a brightness not born of youth, but of the nearness of eternity. One morning, in a quiet hermitage nestled deep among pine-covered hills, Romuald awoke before the sun, as he always did. But this time, something was different. The bird songs seemed distant, the wind more gentle, as if all creation had taken a breath and was waiting. He dressed in his white monastic robe, a symbol of purity, of resurrection, and stepped out into the cool air. The world was still. That day, he called his brothers together. With a soft voice, yet firm as stone, he spoke not of death, but of crossing, like a traveler arriving at the river's edge, ready to pass over. He looked at each one of them, blessing them not just with words, but with a gaze that felt like fire and peace wrapped together. "Remain in the silence," he told them. "Do not fear the darkness, for the light dwells there too." That night, Romuald returned to his small wooden cell. He lay down on the floor, not on a bed, for he had long since given that up, and crossed his hands over his chest. A candle flickered beside him. No one knows what visions he saw or what prayers passed his lips, but the room was filled with a stillness that felt sacred. When the brothers entered the next morning, they found him as if asleep, with a faint smile upon his lips. He had left this world not with a cry, but with a whisper, as gently as a leaf falling into water. But Romuald's passing was not an end. That night, several of the monks saw a strange light surrounding the hermitage, like a flame that did not burn. Others reported hearing distant chanting, though no voices could be found. One novice, too young to understand death, said simply, "Father Romuald is not gone. He has walked into the sky." And perhaps that is the best way to say it. For Romuald did not build cathedrals of stone, nor gather armies, nor write grand theologies. He built a path, quiet, narrow, wild, for the soul to follow. A path through silence, through fire, through shadow and stillness. A path walked barefoot, clothed in white, carrying only trust in the one who waits in the wilderness. And to this day, the Camaldolese monks wear that white, not just as a symbol, but as a reminder that Romuald's journey is not finished. It continues in every heart that dares to turn away from noise, to enter the forest within, and to listen for the voice that speaks in silence. Thank you for walking this sacred path with us. May the light that guided Saint Romuald also guide your own journey into silence, courage, and peace.